Hi guys. I just want to first start out with the question, racism and classism in our schools. I definitely think there's racism and classism in our school. I think it's mostly because people tend to stereotype race. People tend to stereotype everything, but if you think about it, the first thing that comes to your mind when people say stereotype is probably race. It's talked about in our schools a lot. It's talked about in our education a lot. So the example that I want to bring up is from the podcast when the little boy is kind of talking about his schooling, and he's in preschool, and it's this little colored boy, and he's talking about how he got into some trouble at school for minor inconveniences that the school district made bigger. For example, he threw a chair, and come to find out he only moved it, which was disruptive, and I guess he spit on a kid when they eventually found out that he just kind of dribbled spit, which is disruptive. But it was definitely a minor inconvenience that didn't need to be taken to suspension, especially in preschool. But after a while, the mom starts getting worried about her kid, and she's like, I don't know what to do. He doesn't seem mad when I punish him for this. And then they end up going to this birthday party, and some of the moms that she's talking to are kind of astonished that he got suspended in preschool. And one of the white moms actually comes out and says that she only received a phone call after her kid physically assaulted somebody. And she goes on and says that the kid that he punched ended up in the hospital, and she only received a phone call, which I think is crazy. I think that kind of goes and shows what this preschool is kind of putting out there. But I do want to move on a little bit. I just think that's a good example. I want to move on and talk about the podcast a little more and talk about the statistics of Texas schools. When they looked at the statistics of the Texas schools, they went out and started talking about everything the kids did going on to graduation. So starting in kindergarten, moving to graduation. They found that people of color were twice as likely to get suspended than their white peers for their first offense. That's already crazy. That just kind of flicks a switch in my mind, that's suspicious. But then they go a little deeper, and they find out that 83% of black boys have received a suspension at least once, which crazy. So I'm like, what did they do to receive these suspensions? That means, I think they went and said that out of 10 black boys, 2 have not received a suspension. Out of 10. That's crazy. But the suspensions, they go on to say, weren't even for big things. They were for things like disrespect, insubordination, things like that. I just thought that was very interesting, and I think that it just goes to show that racism and classism are definitely apparent in our classrooms.